cameras were rolling. World leaders sat under blazing studio lights in Geneva, each face carefully composed. The audience, a mix of journalists and high-level diplomats, whispered quietly, unsure of what this summit would bring. In the middle of the stage sat Captain Ibrahim Traoré, calm and collected. His green military uniform contrasted sharply with the slick black suits around him. At the far end, Donald Trump leaned forward, hands locked, his face already wearing a smirk. He was about to speak, again, and everyone could feel it. For the past hour, Trump had made snide remarks disguised as jokes. He had mocked African development, interrupted speakers, and even rolled his eyes when Traoré explained food insecurity in the Sahel. But Traoré had stayed calm, too calm. The moderator smiled nervously, shifting papers. "Captain Traoré, would you like to respond?" Traoré opened his mouth, but Trump cut in immediately, laughing loudly. "Oh, please, what would you know about global economics?" The room tensed. Traoré turned his head slowly. His eyes narrowed. A long pause. The camera zoomed in. What happened next would shake the world, and not a single person saw it coming. Ibrahim Traoré's lips twitched, not a smile, but something deeper. The silence in the studio stretched dangerously. Trump leaned back smugly, expecting another measured African response. Maybe a weak smile, maybe silence. But Traoré didn't smile. He didn't nod. Instead, he slowly leaned forward, hands on the desk. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "Shut up, idiot." It came out like thunder, clear, cold, final. A gasp ran through the room like a wave. One woman in the front row literally covered her mouth. The moderator froze, eyes wide. Trump blinked. He hadn't expected that. Not from the soft-spoken captain, not from a young African leader sitting in a sea of suits and status. Trump's face turned red, then purple. He reached for the microphone, but no words came out. The camera zoomed in. Traoré stared at him without blinking. His voice had cracked no jokes, no sarcasm. Just truth soaked in pain. Because it wasn't just about the insult. It was years of being talked down to, mocked, ignored. And in that moment, it all came out. And suddenly, the world was listening. Within 60 seconds, the clip had hit Twitter. The moment Traoré said, "Shut up, idiot," someone had already screen recorded it. By the end of the minute, hashtags like "Sauna Traoré snaps," "Oh, Africa stands up," and "Oh, shut up, idiot," were trending worldwide. Millions who had never heard of Ibrahim Traoré were now Googling his name. Some called him a hero. Others asked, "Who is this guy?" But inside the studio, the air had shifted. Trump's face was still frozen, his jaw clenched, his pride shattered. Traoré didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply sat back, calm, collected, his silence now louder than any shout. Backstage, producers were scrambling. Some wanted to cut the feed. Others whispered, "Leave it, the ratings are exploding." But the moderator? He was sweating bullets. He turned shakily toward Trump. "Mr. Trump, your response?" Trump finally leaned into the mic, his voice shaky. "Is this how African leaders behave now? Like children?" The audience cringed. A few heads turned away. Even some of his usual supporters looked uncomfortable. But Traoré didn't move. His hands were still on the table, steady, because this wasn't a meltdown. It was a moment of truth for all of Africa. Backstage, journalists were panicking, not because of what Traoré said, but because of what it meant. In African villages, people watching from small TVs in local shops had tears in their eyes. In New York, a Ghanaian taxi driver pulled over to replay the clip again. In Ouagadougou, a schoolteacher paused class just to play the video. But in the studio, Trump was losing control. He pointed a shaky finger across the table. "This man is disrespectful. Dangerous." The moderator tried to calm him. "Mr. Trump, please." But Trump was loud now, red-faced, almost yelling. He should apologize to me. Right now. Traoré slowly stood, and for the first time, the entire room fell deadly quiet. He didn't yell back. He didn't curse. He looked Trump in the eye and said softly, "I've buried children you've never met. Don't talk to me about respect." A woman in the front row choked back tears. This wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about pain. It was about truth. And that truth had finally spoken. "Do you want to know why I snapped?" Traoré asked, his voice calm but shaking ever so slightly. He didn't wait for permission to speak. He took a photo from his pocket and raised it. "This is Yakuba, 7 years old. Starved to death last month. Not because we failed him, but because the world did." He paused. The camera zoomed in. The photo of the boy, thin, eyes closed, held by a mother who had nothing left, flashed across every TV screen in the world. Traoré's voice trembled. "I met him a week before. He asked me for bread. We had none. I gave him water and hope." His voice cracked. "I failed him." Even Trump sat still now. "I was mocked today, told I know nothing. But this boy knew more than all of us. He knew hunger. He knew death. And he knew silence from people like you." Viewers everywhere, from Europe to Latin America, were crying. Comment sections exploded. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was a mirror, and the whole world was looking into it. The moderator leaned forward, trying to break the rising emotion. "Captain, this is a diplomatic space." But Traoré cut him off, not with anger, but with quiet fire. "No, this is where people lie with smiles." He turned to the panel. "How many of you have seen a child die of hunger, or walked into a village with no water, no clinic, no shoes on the children's feet?" The leaders stared at him blankly. Traoré's hands were clenched now, knuckles pale. He wasn't just speaking, he was shaking with held-in grief. Trump suddenly spoke again. "Sit down, soldier. You're embarrassing yourself." Traoré didn't move. He locked eyes with Trump and said, "You embarrassed yourself when you laughed at my people." Gasps again. But this time, no one told him to stop. This wasn't just a man on a stage anymore. It was a broken heart speaking for millions. And for the first time in a long time, the world listened. Traoré reached into his briefcase. Not for documents, not for numbers, but for stories. He pulled out a worn leather notebook, pages torn, stained by water and travel. "These aren't statistics," he said softly. "These are names." He flipped it open. The camera zoomed in. Fatima, age 5, died waiting for malaria meds in Kaya. Mohammed, age 2, died while I was holding him. Salif, age 8, shot because he was near a gold mine. A hush swept the stage. Even the moderator's eyes glistened. "These names don't live in your headlines," Traoré whispered. "But they haunt my nights." He raised his eyes. "You laugh, you mock, but I carry them with me. Every single day." Trump stared ahead, stone-faced. But the audience, the people watching at home, on buses, in schools, in refugee tents, were weeping. These weren't just African problems anymore. These were human problems, and one man, in uniform, had just put the entire world on trial, without raising his voice. The silence stretched. Trump finally spoke. "You talk like you're the only one who's seen pain. I've been president of the United States. I've lost things too. But it didn't land. Not today." Traoré looked at him, exhausted. "You lost power. I lost children." His voice trembled again. "Your country talks about borders. We bury boys who never crossed one. Your debates are about fuel prices. Mine are about whether a pregnant woman walks 40 kilometers to maybe find a nurse." Tears welled in his eyes, real ones. And then, like thunder, he said, "You lost elections. I've lost people. Don't compare." A weight
emotion crashed into the studio. The moderator's hands shook. A cameraman wiped his eyes. Even in America, in crowded living rooms and subway cars, people cried. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was too real. Traoré wasn't here to win arguments. He was here to speak for those who couldn't. And with every word, more hearts shattered. Traoré's voice dropped to a whisper. There was a woman, he said. Her name was Awa. The studio was still. She had 3 kids. She begged me to stop the soldiers. I couldn't. I arrived too late. Her husband was already dead. He looked away, eyes glassy. She screamed so loud, I thought the world would split in 2. The camera caught the tears forming in his eyes, and this time he let them fall. I promised her I'd protect what was left, but 2 months later her village was gone. He paused, swallowed. She died too. Trump said nothing. The audience said nothing. The whole world for one long moment simply listened. I carry that scream inside me, Traoré said. It never leaves. He tapped his chest. Right here. Millions of people watching had never heard of Awa, but in that moment they mourned her like family. This wasn't a summit anymore. It was a confession. And Ibrahim Traoré had just opened his soul to the world.
In a village near Jibo, a woman named Mariam was watching the summit on an old solar-powered TV. She sat on a wooden bench, her baby in her lap. As Traoré's words played, she stopped breastfeeding. Her eyes filled with tears. He's saying what we've always screamed, she whispered to her sister. Across the continent, women were gathering, watching, crying, remembering. Mothers who had buried babies. Wives who had lost sons to mines and bullets. Girls who walked barefoot to school with empty stomachs. And they saw him, a soldier who wept for them. In Paris, a journalist live-tweeted through tears. In Nairobi, a bus driver turned up the volume and pulled over so everyone could listen. In Chicago, a young African-American student paused his assignment and stared at the screen. Traoré had done what no headline ever could. He made pain visible, and across the globe, a quiet truth was being born. Africa was not silent. It was ignored, not anymore. Trump leaned forward again. His voice was louder now, but his tone had changed, less arrogant, more shaken. You're emotional. I get it. But this isn't a charity meeting. It's policy. It's leadership. Traoré didn't even flinch. He replied slowly, clearly. You still think this is about you? The moderator looked like he wanted to step in, but he knew better now. The world was watching. Interrupting would only make things worse. This isn't about my emotions, Traoré continued. It's about reality. About millions of people being crushed while others argue over tables and chairs. He turned to the camera. Someone out there is watching this while starving. Someone is about to bury their child, and we sit here like it's just another debate. He shook his head slowly. We talk about GDPs and oil, but when do we talk about graves? His voice cracked, but he kept going. You say I'm emotional. I say you're numb. That line, you're numb, pierced the air like a blade. Even Trump stopped blinking. Traoré's face was calm again, but the fire hadn't left. Traoré paused. He looked down for a moment, gathering himself. Then he looked into the camera again. This morning, before coming here, he said, I received a call. The room leaned in. A small boy in northern Burkina Faso was killed while walking to school. His shoes were too torn to protect him from the landmine buried in the sand. Trump looked down now. Traoré's voice softened. His name was Idrissa. He was 6. His sister watched him die. He pulled something from his jacket, a tiny sandal blackened and broken. This was his. Gasps filled the air. Traoré held it with both hands, trembling slightly. I carry this, not as a weapon, but as a reminder of how far we've fallen. The zoomed in slowly. The sandal filled the screen. Millions of people, and from Washington to Abuja, wept in front of their screens. This wasn't a summit anymore. It was a sermon. A wound reopened. A moment that no one would ever forget. At the very edge of the stage sat a quiet observer. He wasn't a leader, not a journalist, just an interpreter. He had been translating in real time, from English to French and back again. But now, he had stopped. Tears streamed down his cheeks. When asked later why he paused, he said, "There are no words for what that man just said." As Traoré placed the sandal gently on the table, a studio assistant accidentally dropped a clipboard. The sudden sound startled everyone, reminding them they were still in a room, still live, still seen by millions. But no one spoke. Even Trump had leaned back, pale, withdrawn, shaken. This wasn't about who was right anymore. It was about what was real. And in that silence, the world began to understand something it had ignored for decades. This man, this captain from a small war-torn country, wasn't just a leader. He was a witness, and his pain was too honest to deny. The clip of Traoré holding up the child's sandal was everywhere now. But it wasn't just the clip that spread like fire. It was a whisper he had muttered under his breath as he sat back down, barely audible, only caught by the microphone clipped to his chest. He said, "If the world won't weep, I will." By nightfall, the phrase had been translated into over 40 languages. Artists began painting murals. Protesters held signs. Mothers wrote it on their palms. Journalists led their stories with it. People everywhere whispered it like a prayer. "If the world won't weep, I will." Back in the studio, the debate had all but collapsed. The moderator tried to redirect. "Let's shift to trade agreements." "No," Traoré said, raising one hand gently. "Let's shift to humanity." He wasn't angry now. He was something more dangerous to the powerful, clear. Even Trump had stopped interrupting. He just stared. Because something had changed. Not in the conversation, but in the atmosphere of the world. Just as the summit neared its end, a producer rushed onto the stage with a phone in hand. He whispered something to the moderator. The moderator's eyes widened. We have a live call," he stuttered. "From the United Nations Secretary General." The room tensed. "This is highly unusual," the moderator added, but the line was already patched in. A calm, composed voice filled the speakers. "I've been watching from New York. I was going to remain silent, but I can't." He paused. What the world just saw wasn't politics. It was a cry for justice. He continued, voice steady. "Captain Traoré, today you didn't speak for Burkina Faso. You spoke for every forgotten soul." Traoré bowed his head slightly, lips pressed. "And to Mr. Trump," the voice added, "there are moments when power is shown not in words, but in silence." The line cut. The studio erupted in applause. Not for show, but from something real. Even some of Trump's own allies stood. And for the first time that night, Captain Traoré smiled. Not because he had won, but because someone had finally listened. As the summit drew to a close, the room was still heavy with emotion. Traoré's words had carved deep wounds and planted seeds of hope. But the captain wasn't done. He stood, his voice steady, eyes clear. "I carry the weight of Burkina Faso," he said softly. "Not just as a leader, but as a brother, a son, a friend." He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. "For every child who sleeps hungry, for every mother who cries alone, for every family broken by war, this is our fight." Tears streamed silently down his cheeks. He looked directly at the cameras. "This fight is not mine alone. It belongs to all of us." There was no bravado here, no false pride, only the raw truth of a man bearing his people's pain. The silence in the room was deafening, and in that silence, a bridge began to form, between nations, between hearts. Trump sat quietly for the first time, his usual bravado gone, replaced by something more vulnerable. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I didn't come here to be humbled," he admitted, voice low. "But Captain Traoré, your courage is undeniable." He looked at Traoré with a flicker of respect. "I may not understand your struggles fully, but today, you opened my eyes." The room shifted. People exchanged looks. Hope sparked. Traoré nodded slightly, accepting the rare gesture. The summit wasn't about winners and losers anymore. It was about humanity. And sometimes it takes one brave voice to break the silence and change everything. As cameras stopped rolling and the world absorbed what had happened, Traoré quietly packed his things. Back in his hotel room, he stared out at the city lights, exhausted but hopeful. His phone buzzed with messages from strangers, supporters, even critics. One message stood out. "You made us see. Thank you for your truth." Traoré smiled faintly. He knew the fight was far from over. But tonight, a line had been drawn, a moment that would echo for generations. Because sometimes courage isn't loud, it's the quiet refusal to be silenced. As the sun rose over Geneva, the world wasn't the same, and neither was Captain Ibrahim Traoré. If this story touched your heart, please hit like, subscribe, and comment below. Tell us, which part moved you the most? What do you think courage truly means? Your thoughts help this message reach more people who need to hear it. Together we can share hope, truth, and strength. Thank you for watching. Your support means the world.